Hello everyone,
Hello.
it's Atuksha from Simple Crowdfunding, and today I'm here with Phillip and Valerie, who are trustees of the Commonwealth Housing Trust. The Commonwealth Housing Trust is a charity that Simple Crowdfunding is currently supporting, and I've asked them to come along and tell us a little bit about what they're doing. So before we actually start talking about the work that the Commonwealth Housing Trust are doing, Phillip and Valerie, can you please introduce yourself? Phillip, do you want to start?
Okay, thank you very much. Great to be here and have the chance to talk about this project. So my name is Phillip Hilman. I've worked for the last 37 years in the property sector as an advisor and broker. I've worked with JLL, the global property advisor. And in that time, I've particularly focused on student housing developments across the UK, Europe, and indeed also in Australia, India, and Africa. So the work that I've done on the whole has been advisory. I've been quite involved with the RICS, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, during that time as well. And indeed, that's how I got involved in the project, was because a former president of the RICS contacted me. He knew I had connections with Kenya, and he said, would I like to get involved? And my connection with Kenya is a quite simple one. Back in the 1980s, when I was a young lad, I was a volunteer teacher for 2 years in Kenya, in a place near Machakos. Absolutely loved it. And a lot of people who visited Kenya and had some involvement, it just grabs you, it catches you. And I've had this fascination and love of East Africa and Kenya in particular ever since.
Thank you. Valerie?
Well, I'm Valerie Kent, and my background's very different from Phillip, in that I was an academic in teaching social psychology for many years, and then went to Kenya with my then husband, and ended up staying for 17 years. So as Phillip says, it does grab you. What I was actually doing was my side hustle, as it were, of doing an enormous amount of music. I'm a trained singer as well. And so it was very different. But I do actually know quite a bit about housing for other reasons, but not at the level that Phillip is. So in that time, two things happened. One was a visit from Clifford Dan, our founder. Through the music connection, I was asked to put on a concert, and I knew him anyway, but he didn't know I knew him. Was asked to put on a fundraising concert in the cathedral by him, where he wanted to play the organ, which was just because he was also a musician. Anyway, so we got together then, but that was when he hadn't even founded things quite. Then my son was doing a degree at the LSE, postgraduate, which involved housing. And somebody said to him, you must meet this guy, Clifford Dan. He's got very similar ideas to yours. And so together they founded the Commonwealth Housing Trust. But I wasn't involved then, partly because they did the tsunami in Sri Lanka. They did some houses there, and they did another building project in Kenya before then Clifford asking my son for contacts in Kenya for possible projects of support. And he was an intern at UN at that point, and the contacts arose there. So but it goes back to 2006, when it was just the 25 families, as Phillip said earlier, multi-faith, multi-tribe.
So we're both trustees of the Commonwealth Housing Trust.
Yes.
The other trustees are mostly involved in real estate. We have two past presidents of the RICS who are also trustees. And indeed, the founder, Clifford Dan, was also a past president of the RICS. Yes. We've got architects, very much a real estate focus, but also people with a knowledge of marketing, people who also have knowledge of Kenya as well.
So just thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask about the Housing Trust and the work that you're doing in a moment. Just for the people listening. So we came across the Commonwealth Housing Trust by chance. Philip and I were at the same meeting and we had a conversation, and we also have I personally have a connection to Kenya in that I was actually born in Kenya. And so we got talking about Kenya, and we learned about the project. So the property connection is absolutely there. There were so many different things and so many conversations that sort of sparked off just from this initial one. And we learned a lot more about the charity or the trust and the work that's being done. And thought, absolutely, this is a project that Simple would like to support. It's community helping community, which is really important. And we just love the idea of it. And so to that, could one of you just tell us briefly about what the Commonwealth Housing Trust does, talk about your past projects before we talk about the current one in Kenya?
I don't think either of us can talk fully about the past projects because the ones in Sri Lanka and Kenya are very, very briefly. But I would just like to say that the ethos and the sort of mission that Clifford Dan had and based on which it was set up was to help communities who are trying to help themselves.
Yeah,
that's the essence, that they are a community. It's an established group. We know the people. And they were prepared to work, and so their training was arranged, so they all got certificated building training and so on. The earlier projects were slightly different, or I know that the Sri Lanka one, what they did was engage local professionals to build some houses after the tsunami again.
right.
So that was, and the other Kenyan one was building a dormitory for disabled children because they often got attacked if they tried to get to school, so they needed to stay in the school, and that was quite small scale, but two of the people involved in that have continued. The site engineer was the site engineer for that project, and so on. So everybody knows everybody, works together quite well.
So I can just say a little bit about this project then, if I may. Nairobi has several well-known slums, and one of the nastiest slums is an area called Korogosho. And Korogosho also happens to be Nairobi's main rubbish dump. And there is this mountain of rubbish that really is a large hill that is burning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And around this pile of rubbish is this shanty town. And this shanty town is constantly enveloped in fumes from the rubbish dump. And I was taken by some of the members of the organization to go and see and spend a few hours looking around how people are living in this dump, Korogosho. And I was prepared to see it being horrible, but I wasn't prepared to come away with eyes reddened by the fumes. You just couldn't escape it. But also to meet with people who are trying to live the best lives they can and bring up children, and to see the awful slum conditions, and them trying to retain their dignity whilst actually being frankly ripped off by gang landlords in many cases, having to pay a lot of money to be in a horrible little shack, and with illegal electricity and water supplies coming through that are, again, they're being ripped off. So I saw that, and then I saw a site with planning consent for 25 houses on the outskirts then of Nairobi. This was some 7 or 8 years ago, and I saw this other site which the charity had bought some years ago, that we'd obtained planning consent on to build 25 new houses for these to help 25 families relocate from the slum to this greenfield site. And at the time, it was very much the edge of Nairobi, But now Nairobi has grown so fast. It is one of the fastest growing cities in the world. And the city is almost sort of leapfrogged the site, and all around the site now is housing. And on the site itself, we have worked with the 25 families who are members of this, effectively a housing association in Kenya called MWAMKO. We've worked with them to help them, give them skills so that they can build houses themselves. So it's a self-built housing project. And the family members have had training that we've helped provide, working with a team in Kenya who are helping from a Kenyan perspective and using the local skills and contacts. Again, we have the RICS in Kenya actively involved, and the lady who's in charge of the RICS in Kenya is one of our trustees. So with contributions coming in terms of technical expertise and ensuring appropriate accountability for funds and so on, we've got to the point now where 8 houses have been built and the families have moved into those 8 houses. Another 4 or 5 houses are currently under construction. As we talk, I think they built the foundations, they're just starting to build the walls. 25 houses in total, costs about £10,000-ish a house to build. So we've had some donors who've come forward and have paid for a house. Others have paid towards a house. But they know when they've made those donations that that is straight away completely going into the construction of these assets. And it's done very cheaply relative to doing it commercially because it is self-build. But Valerie, I just wondered if perhaps you might just like to say about some of the further benefits that have come as a result of the skills that people have learned.
Yes, thank you. One of the benefits is just the fact that these families have maybe 6, 8 children, sometimes extended family that they're looking after. And they were sleeping in, essentially all of them, in rooms that were 3 meters by 3 meters, not just sleeping, living. You roll out your mat on the earth floor to go to sleep with your mother and father and your siblings and your extended family, and then you roll them up in the morning. How people stay so immaculately clean, I have no idea. They go to a standpipe to wash and so on. So now they've got privacy. And that means that the children can have a space to study. The boy children can sleep separately from the girl children. And to the delight of the parents, they can sleep away from the children. As I say, they're not huge rooms. They have maximized the space. They've made, they had a porch, which is sort of necessary in Kenyan weather, but they made it a balcony, and they're growing little vegetable gardens on the balcony. And one lady is, to my delight, because I've been waiting for years for this, keeping chickens, because they each have their own little garden. And although it's still a building site, they're starting to use that. One of the ladies said, I feel safe. I have never felt safe in my life before. She's got looking after 8 children. And she's absolutely lovely. She said, you go to the market and you have your 200 shilling note in your hand, which you've worked hard to get. And then somebody comes and just takes it out of your hand before you've bought whatever. She said, and I just feel so safe here. The children can go safely to school. There's an asthmatic lady, wife of the project manager. She was having to leave the Korogocho to go back to her rural home, which was miles away, hundreds of miles away, because when she was there, she didn't get asthma attacks. But Philip's right, the air in Korogocho is absolutely killing. And when you say a dump sounds big. The dump is 30 acres. And the United Nations said it should be enclosed in the early 1990s. And it's still there. Yeah. And it's still the main dump. And they send medical waste from hospitals, waste from chemical factories, everything goes there. It's inexplicably poisonous. Anyway, and then we had 25 young people from the families were trained in building skills, different skills, very cleverly done. So masonry and carpentry and plumbing and electrical work and so on. and they got certificates. They had proper work experience with building firms that cooperated, and they got certificates. And what was intended anyway is that they've now got new livelihoods. Virtually all of them are out working as builders in Nairobi and well beyond. And the people who've moved to the new site is a little outside a little town, well, getting a big town, as Phillip says, called Kamulu. And the people who are there, they're getting new jobs. One of them had one afternoon a week as a slum teacher, informal school, not a proper school at all, teaching assistant. He's now got 2 jobs in primary schools, in proper state schools. And he's tutoring students at the weekend, of secondary students. And it's just, I mean, the transformation is just astonishing. And 2 of the young girls who are, I would say, 18, 20 or something, still at home, the project arranged for an NGO to fund them for training. And now one's a trained tailor and the other one is training as a beautician. And again, they're setting up. So it's just absolutely transformative for them. On the allocation, it's simply that they also included an appeals process. So it's weighted according to need, according to how much you've worked for the project and you haven't just sat on your hands. Or if you can't work, then you've done something else, you've made some food to take to the builders, or whatever. They have a week to appeal. And so far, nobody has appealed against the decision. And in the first round of the first 5, people said, well, I didn't apply because I knew I didn't deserve it as much as they did, which is like jaw-dropping, I thought. Sorry.
I was going to say, it's a wonderful setup, isn't it? Because they're all working it out amongst themselves as well.
Absolutely.
And having the skills, the building skills that have been provided absolutely helps them when building their own houses, but it also gives them a future, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And they've
one of the things I love,
future. Yeah.
What I particularly love about the project is this community of 25 families who have been sticking with this for 15 or so years, waiting for us to get planning consent on this site, which we were going to do it by the book. So with no bribes were taken, we waited to get proper consent, proper title, proper ownership. Again, that can take a long time in Kenya.
It took 3 years to get the title.
Yeah. So all these times they were waiting. And when I first visited the site, and I met several of them on the site, which was just a green field at the time, rather dry, but they were saying, Mr. Hilman, very nice to meet you, but when are the houses going to be built? And the honest truth was I couldn't promise when that would happen. It was going to be when we had the appropriate planning consent, which we were still waiting for, I think, at that time, and also, of course, when funds were raised. So at the moment, what we're trying to do is, we want to finish off this project, which is 25 houses. Say we're well on the way with 8 built and with another 4 or so started. But, we do need to raise the funds at £10,000 a house for those remaining houses. And we'd like to do that as quickly as we can so that we can have the efficiencies of building houses in groups rather than one after another after another. So we're busy fundraising for that. Of course, it's a difficult economic climate in Kenya. It's a difficult economic climate here and indeed much of the world. But I can only say that from a personal point of view, and I'm sure Valerie feels the same, having been there and met the people and having seen the site and also now hearing the difference it's making to people's lives, it does give you a passion to get this thing finished. And then the lessons that we'll learn from this, we would love to take so that there is a legacy here, not only for this site, because these will be rented properties, the ownership will be retained by the charity, but they will be rented at very affordable rents. And for the families who keep paying, there will be the chance to continue for them to make it feel their home. But we would love to use the lessons that we've learned from this for subsequent projects, just as there were projects prior to this one. And I think there will be lots that we've learned, not least about how are the best ways to go fundraising, and indeed crowdfunding, is one of those areas that, I think we're learning about. But we've had support, so say a number of people who are mostly through connections of the trustees, through direct approaches. But we've had people donate sometimes a whole house. But generally, most of the donations are coming through on a smaller basis, but they do accumulate. The money is being, we're really monitoring how it's spent very carefully so that we can give people confidence that what they give goes to the project. And also it's of a scale that is a very human scale, and to see this community group, this effectively a housing association, creating a wonderful, not idealistic community, but it's a real grounded community. And the way that they are allocating houses, as Valerie said, we're in awe of how professionally, but also how humanly it's all been handled. And we continue to guide and steer, but it is this extraordinary group of people who've been, brought up in the slums, living in the slums, who have at the same time shown a tremendous community spirit and are creating new lives for themselves and for their successors. It is quite extraordinary. If anybody, wants to get involved with the project, we'd love to tell you more about it. There's the Commonwealth Housing Trust webpage, which we can provide a link for. And there is a newsletter that Valerie regularly puts together. The people who are supporting will be receiving regular updates on the newsletter. And indeed, some have visited the site, and that's something that we're happy to discuss with the local group so that you can understand and see firsthand what it is that's happening.
There's so many wonderful things about this project, aren't there? One, it is helping people. It's just giving people a better start.
It is, and I think when you see those videos that are on the website, you'll hear firsthand from the people who are living in the houses and saying, what the differences it's made to their life. We've done our best to describe that, but to hear firsthand, and also you'll see the the people constructing the houses and all the guys who've had training in all their high-vis jackets and everything, doing the construction and the full PPE. I mean, it's being done properly, and it's being well supervised. It's not just creating homes, which is pretty important. It's creating a community that started in the slum and that is now being created in this new home. And we will go to our graves knowing that this thing has changed lives, and we would love to do more, but let's get this one finished first.
Yes, exactly that. And once these houses are fully funded and built, then there are so many lessons learned. But first and foremost, the fact that a house can be built for £10,000 is wonderful. The fact that people are getting skills and they are vested, have a vested interest in actually getting this house built. The fact that the men typically build the houses and the women will decorate, I just think is wonderful. Everyone is doing what is right and what they're able to make this a success. And so the lessons learned from it for doing another project anywhere in the world is immense.
We were conscious that you could build cheaper and you could build higher density, but it was one of Clifford Dan, the founder's favorite comments, is that we don't want to create slums of the future. Right. So we want to create housing that they can be proud of, and that the donors and supporters can also recognize that, this is fit and proper housing. And yes, look, it's a relatively small scale project, but I see that as a strength, not a weakness, because it's relatable. You can understand the progress of this. This isn't some, multinational aid organization. This is a focused one-site project, but with people of all different backgrounds in Nairobi who've lived a really tough life in the slums. And now they're wanting better for their children, and then they've suffered and they've scrimped and saved to pay their very small monthly contributions that have really, if you like, kept them committed to the project. And now it's great to see the beginning of the reward for that and the reward of the project. As I say, we want to see it finished, and so that's why, you know, we're here talking to you today, is because we want people to think about whether they can participate as well in this project and support it.
Absolutely. And with that, so whatever is affordable in terms of donations is very, very welcome, isn't it? Because all of it will go towards the next house and the next house and the next house. So that's a wonderful thing. I know that there are a lot of videos in terms of the progress of the existing houses, having conversations with those who are benefiting from this whole project on your website. For people to contact you, what is the best way to be able to do that?
Well, that's quite straightforward. They go to our website, where they'll also be able to read a lot more about the project, and also to donate if they wish
Perfect.
So there's a link on the website where you can make your donations.
Yes,
Fabulous. And I'll add a link to the bottom of this video. So then the website will be there as well for everyone who wants to get involved.
Yeah,
I know that you're very happy to have conversations for people who want to learn more as well. But the first place of call is absolutely the website, and people will be able to respond from there.
Yes, yes.
Philip, Valerie, thank you so much for your time. I very much appreciate it. It's a wonderful project, and I'm looking forward to hearing about the completion of the final house for this phase.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to those of you who are watching this for giving it your time and interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.